Good morning and welcome to the LEA Special Education Point of Contact monthly webinar. Today is Friday, March 23rd, 2018. Today is rescheduled from earlier this week when we had a snow day on March 21st. My name is Annette Thacker-Bartlett. I am with the ESY Division of Teaching and Learning, and I will be joined today by my colleague, Ms. Jessica Dulay from the Division of Teaching and Learning. She will be presenting on the discipline portion of the webinar. I'm also joined today by my colleague, Mr. Douglas Johnson from the ESY Division of Student Transportation, as well as Ms. Christy Weaver-Harris from the ESY Division of K-12 Systems and Supports. Today we're going to start off with a few updates on student transportation, as well as a few reminders. Then I'm going to provide updates on the checklist of things that you need to do to prepare for ESY, for extended school year. I know it's only March, but there are several things that you or your colleagues may need to take care of in various data systems in order to prepare for ESY. So I will go through that checklist with you and share with you some updated deadlines that have been established to make that process more streamlined. Then the majority of our webinar today will be focused on an overview of discipline for students with disabilities. And then we will continue on and finish the webinar with reminders and announcements. So first I'm going to turn the time over to Doug with our Division of Student Transportation for updates and announcements. Go ahead, Doug.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone has been a good morning so far. It's Friday. Yay. Okay, so for TOPE this year, we do have a couple of announcements. So we are currently going through the process of bringing to our LEAs a new system. The new system hasn't been broadcasted out to everyone just yet because we're currently going through the testing mode and the testing phases on the internal side of things, but we will be rolling out a new system to you all very soon. It's a cloud-based system. We'll be able to streamline and it's a reduction in data entry, so that's a good thing for all our LEAs, but we still have to have you all, put information in the system here and there. And also, in the meantime, since it is certification season, the TOTE system is configured and ready to go for you all to submit calendar information for the upcoming ESY season, ESY 2018, and also for SY as well. So while the new system is not available just yet, we do have the current TOTE system available and updated and ready to go for you all to submit calendar information for ESY if you know that information, and also SY 2018-2019 as well. And if you know that your students that are eligible for ESY that are going to ESY this year, go ahead and submit their transportation request as well. We do have all that information ready in the system for you all, so you can go ahead and submit things for us. And also, we will have training sessions coming up sooner than later. We're just currently going through internal decision making, so we can know what dates we will be actually having those trainings. But as of right now, we do have a webinar that we did on the 21st for you all that has the certification process at the end of that particular webinar. I want to say it's like the last 15 to 10 minutes of the webinar. You can use that. And then we also have the TOTE Quick Start Guide as well that'll be available on our OSSI website as well once it goes through the approval process. That'll be available to you all as well. And then also you can just also always call the TOTE support line, which is 202-556-5520. Okay, you can always get to us at that time as well. It's 576-5520. So you can always reach out to us as well. Again, on your screen, you see the resources right here for you to utilize to submit transportation requests and things like that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the box, and I'll answer your questions while I'm on the line right now. You go to the next slide for me, Annette.
Great.
Okay, do also, please. Okay.
All right, go ahead, Doug, and if you can share some reminders about ESY as well.
Okay, so right now is the certification line time for us as well. Certification for ESY, that deadline is the first Monday in May, which is May the 7th, 2018. So please make sure that you finalize all your student IEPs, saying that, hey, they'll be reporting to ESY, and if they'll be utilizing transportation. That'll help us out as well, so we can know how many bus drivers and attendants that we'll need on our end as well. So just also know that we'll need an ESY calendar and bail times updated in total as well. Then also the student demographics information, making sure that their addresses are correct, making sure that we have the correct contacts in the system, and also their eligibility and ESY location information is confirmed in total, because we need to know what sites that your kids will be attending for ESY. And once you have all that information in the system, this correct, make sure you're able to submit the transportation request. And if you have any issues or any questions with submitting the transportation request, please reach out to the TOTE support line. And I'll reiterate it again, it's 202-576-5520. And lastly, the deadlines for certification. ESY is the first Monday in May, which is May the 7th, 2018. And for SY, it's 2018-19 is June the 4th, which is also the first Monday in June. Please note that, you can submit your calendars in the system at this time right now. And so everything is available. Everything is running just fine in the system. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. If you want to reach out to us via the TOTE support line, again, the number is 202-576-5520. And also you can email us at dot.data@dc.gov. We'll answer any emails that you send in to us and everything like that. But I prefer, if you have any detailed questions, just call the TOTE support line, and one of our members of the data and technology team will definitely reach out to you to assist you. Okay?
Thank you, Doug. All right, everybody.
No problem at all.
That was Doug.
Thanks, Doug. Great job.
Transportation team. And as he mentioned, our webinar last month that many of you may have attended, the last 15 minutes of our webinar last month was a refresher training on how to use TOTE to submit those transportation requests. So you are able to go back and listen to that recording if you need a refresher on how to use TOTE.
Yes, and always please reach out to us. We're here for your assistance. It don't matter what the question is. It may seem like it's a small question to you, but we're here to help you. So just always reach out to us, and that if they have any questions, just reach out to us and we will answer them, okay?
Great. Thank you so much, Team Transportation. And
thank you.
Speaking of ESY, we also have a couple, want to review with you the full checklist of things you need to do for ESY in the various data systems. So we talked a little bit about transportation, and we talked about the certification deadline. Every year, the certification deadline is the first Monday in May. And so what we've done this year is we've tried to streamline the things that you do across several different data systems so that they all align with that first Monday in May deadline. And this is important because OSSE needs time to prepare for ESY, and so do you. So that we're asking that you're making all of those major decisions by that first Monday in May with regards to who's going to ESY, where you're going to hold your ESY, and who needs transportation. So let's turn to the ESY checklist. This checklist is 2 pages long. The first page is SEDS, and the second page is going to talk about TOTE, eSchool Plus, and SLED. So that's 4 different data systems where you or one of your colleagues may need to do some, complete some tasks to prepare for ESY. So let's start with SEDS, and then I'll move on to the other 3 data systems. So in SEDS, there's a number of things you have to do to get ready for ESY that hopefully you are already aware of. Of course, at the individual student level, you have to determine who is eligible for ESY and who is eligible for ESY transportation. So this first line item here in the checklist is determining on the individual student level. Now you notice that you could have started this last year, and hopefully during each individual IEP annual update meeting, you should have already been determining this. Of course, if a student's status needs to change, you can easily do that with an IEP amendment. You'll notice here that the deadline is Friday, May 4th. That is one business day earlier than the certification deadline of Monday, May 7th. That's because it takes one business day for the SED system to relay that updated information over to the TOTE system. So TOTE is the sort of like the last system, is the downstream system. Other systems feed into TOTE. So for SEDS, we've bumped the deadline back one business day so that everything that's finalized in SEDS, you have to wait 24 hours or till the next business day for it to show up in TOTE. So Friday, May 4th is the deadline to accomplish these tasks in SEDS of denoting a student status. Also, you as the LEA Special Ed POC, you have the ability and the responsibility to update the calendar in SEDS. In SEDS, there's a calendar tab that only you have access to that sets the calendar for the entire LEA. You need to go in there and make sure that the start and end dates of ESY and the school and non-school days for ESY for those progress reporting periods are established and that they are correct in your SEDS calendar. So this is a task that only you can do as the LEA Special Ed POC. Nobody else has this ability to do it within SEDS. So that is something that also needs to be done by Friday, May 4th. And if you are looking for resources to help you remember how to do these things, there's a link to last month's webinar recording, and there's a link to the SEDS user guide, as well as the LEA Special Ed POC manual with the page number where you can read more about this. And then coming later for ESY, at the end of ESY, you're going to be generating service trackers based on the service logs that were input throughout the ESY period. So that's something coming later down the road, but we wanted to make sure we included it on this checklist so that you have everything in one place of what you need to do in SEDS for ESY. Now for the other three data systems. You are the LEA Special Ed POC. You may also be the Transportation POC and the LEA Data Manager if you're at a smaller LEA where you wear multiple hats, or it may be one of your colleagues who serves as the transportation point of contact and who serves as the LEA Data Manager. So if it's not you, then we ask that you please pass this information along to your colleagues. I know yesterday there was an LEA Data Managers meeting at OSSE. They have their monthly meetings at OSSE, and I know during that meeting the LEA Data Managers were reminded of their responsibility to do things in eSchool Plus and SLED to prepare for ESY. So they received that reminder, but if you want to get together with them and coordinate who's doing what, that would be great. So for TOTE, Doug from our transportation team already reminded you about the deadline of Monday, May 7th to complete transportation request forms for each student who is eligible for ESY transportation. In eSchool Plus, which is a separate data system, there's just one task related to ESY that needs to be done. This may not be you who does this. This actually may be the LEA Data Manager, so please connect with them to make sure it gets done. The ESY calendar needs to be set up in eSchool Plus. You're the one doing it in SEDS. The LEA Data Manager is likely the one who needs to do this in eSchool Plus, and this also needs to be done by Friday, May 4th. For those of you that are going to have to do this in eSchool Plus yourself, there is a webinar training happening next week, and that webinar training will be recorded and posted in case you are on spring break and not able to attend that training. Or you can pass this information along to your LEA Data Manager. Now in SLED, there is several tasks that have to be done for ESY and SLED. That includes inputting your actual site locations. This is a new thing. Last year you had to, I believe you had to email OSSE and tell them the site locations for ESY, and then OSSE put them in SLED. This year you get to actually put it in yourself. And again, this may be you or it may be the LEA Data Manager. So please connect with the Data Manager at your LEA and figure out who's doing what to make sure that these tasks are done by the deadline of Friday, May 4th. So you're doing all your major decision making by Friday, May 4th of who's eligible for ESY, where you're going to hold ESY, and which location each student will be assigned to. And that information needs to be put into the SLED ESY module. There is a webinar training taking place next week, and it will be repeated the week after that in April. The dates are right here, and you can register using the link here. And as a reminder, you can download a copy of today's slides from the handouts menu on your toolbar for GoToMeeting. And you will use the same ESY module in SLED to indicate overall ESY attendance at the end of the ESY period. Or if a student is eligible but the parent decides to opt out, for example, you may have a student who is eligible because of their disability and their rates of regression and recoupment and things like that. A student may have a yes for ESY on their IEP, but the parent may say, no, they're not going to ESY, they're going to summer camp instead. That's fine. You can continue to leave it as a yes on the IEP. And then in the SLED module, you can indicate that the parent is opting out and so that they will not be attending. And again, the trainings are coming up, and so we encourage you or your colleague, whoever's going to be in charge of this part of the ESY checklist, to attend those trainings. Okay, and now we are going to move into the main portion of today's trainings, where we are going to do an overview, provide an overview, a high-level overview of discipline for students with disabilities. Discipline is a tricky topic. It's very complex. Nothing is ever black and white. There's a lot happening at the federal level for legislation and lawsuits and things. There's also a lot happening at the local level with regards to legislation, lawsuits, policies, guidance, and things change as well. And so today is a high-level overview of where we stand right now with the current laws and policies for discipline for students with disabilities. And of course, if there are changes that come in the future, either at the federal level or at the local DC level, if there's ever changes to legislation for discipline, we will be sure to provide updates and additional training at that time. Now today, we are going to try to cover the basic principles here that you need to keep in mind as a refresher, but also know that we are working on developing a more lengthy and in-depth training on discipline for students with disabilities, and that training will be offered at OSSE coming up in the future, and we will be sure to let you know when those dates are set. And as we're going along today, feel free to type your questions into the chat box, and we have Christy Weaver-Harris from our policy team on the line, as well as members of her team to help answer questions. And of course, there may be questions that you ask that we are not able to answer right away that we may need to go do more research on, and that's okay too. So we welcome all of your questions, no matter how tricky or juicy your questions are. Feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll either answer them now or we will take them and go conduct additional research to try to find those answers for you. So let's talk about the legislation updates, and then we're going to dive into some case scenarios. And before we do that, I just want to remind you of the definitions and the way that they will be used in this training today. We have in-school suspensions, where the child is temporarily removed from their regular classroom for disciplinary purposes. Then we have direct supervision. And then a term that we often focus on is the out-of-school suspension, when the child is temporarily removed outside of the school setting for disciplinary purposes. This includes both removals in which no IEP services are provided when it's, and that under the law is okay when it's 10 days or less. And the same definition of out-of-school suspension can still apply when the removal is beyond those 10 days and the child continues to receive those IEP services. Expulsion is an action when the child is removed for the remainder of the school year. So that's different than suspension. And disciplinary action is a term that's pretty broad that can cover either in school or out of school suspension or expulsion. So that's more of a broad umbrella term. So those are some terms you may see today. Let's start with a reminder about what's current from the federal level. Just a couple years ago, in 2016, the U.S. Department of Education came out with additional guidance and regulations. In this case, they came out with a Dear Colleague letter that specifically talked about providing students with disabilities those appropriate supports, such as positive behavioral supports, that are needed to let that student remain in the classroom and have that meaningful access to their educational environment. Issuing this Dear Colleague letter came because there was a need to add clarity. There had been a lot of confusion about what you were obligated to do. And so this letter came out to provide clarity on the types of supports that you needed to provide to students with disabilities and what may constitute a denial of FAPE. At the local level, we've had a couple different things happen recently. A big change in the law came in 2015 with the PreK Student Discipline Amendment Act, and that amended the law to prohibit the expulsion of pre-K students from publicly funded community-based organizations, which we call CBOs, as well as public schools that provide that pre-K education. It also goes beyond that, not just expelling pre-K students, but it also prohibits suspending a pre-K student unless an administrator determines that that student willfully caused or attempted to cause serious bodily injury to somebody else. And that excludes self-defense, of course. And then also it mandates that if you do decide to suspend, it cannot exceed 3 days for any individual incident. So this amendment got pretty specific about pre-kindergarten students and taking disciplinary action there. But what it also did was, as part of this amendment, it strengthened the laws around reporting and what has to be reported annually to OSSI, and then OSSI shares publicly about disciplinary actions by LEAs. And so as part of that Amendment Act, these items were specifically called out as now going to be part of an annual data collection that then is reported publicly. So all LEAs now have to report the total number of suspensions, both in school and out of school, including the total number of days, and what happened to the student during that time. What setting were they referred to? Were they actually expelled? Did they transfer to another LEA, either voluntarily or involuntarily? And a description of the action that led to that suspension or expulsion. So this language came about in 2015, and then in 2016, additional language came out that strengthens even more, that makes it even more specific, the type of data that we collect and report on annually. And this is just a summary. You can actually read more specifically about this in OSSI's discipline guidance. I've uploaded a PDF copy of OSSI's discipline guidance to the handouts menu of your GoToWebinar toolbar. And also on one of the next slides towards the end of the webinar, there's also a slide with the link to the website where you can download all of the policies and laws that I'm referencing in these slides. So in 2016, the local legislation was amended to be even more specific about the data that we collect. So you have to, schools have to provide information on suspensions that were between 1 and 5 days, and then separately suspensions that were between 6 and 10 days, and then suspensions that were more than 10 days. You have to report on the number of students receiving more than one suspension in the school year, the number of students referred to an alternative educational setting for the course of a suspension, a description of the types of actions that led to the suspension or expulsion, the number of students expelled, and students who voluntarily or involuntarily transferred or withdrew during the school year. So and here in DC, we just feel that there needs to be more accountability and very straightforward reporting on the status of what's going on with suspensions and expulsions. And so that's why these laws were strengthened. And so again, you can read more about these in OSSI's discipline guidance, which is available to download from your menu bar, or the link to it is coming in a future slide. And so what we want to do with you today is talk about some key concepts when it comes to discipline for students with disabilities. It's an overview, it's a refresher. Again, we're not getting into the details of every single situation you might find yourself in, but hopefully today will be a good refresher and reminder of some basic principles. And we are going to share with you actual scenarios that have happened that have resulted in lawsuits where the court has ruled certain ways when it comes to these situations, just to illustrate how the principles should be applied. So I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague, Ms. Jessica Dulé, who is a member of OSSI's Teaching and Learning Division and who focuses on school supports and school climate, positive behavior interventions, and all sorts of things there. And as well as response to intervention. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica. And again, please type your questions throughout the presentation. And when we're done with this portion, we will wrap up the webinar with a few more reminders and announcements.
Great, thanks, Annette. Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay, Annette?
Yep, the sound is great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that introduction. And I'll be now just kind of switching over to some of these concepts that are listed here on this slide. And I think it's just a good, important reminder for us to remember that we do want to make sure that we're getting to know what's written on our students' IEPs, making sure that we are providing the necessary supports and services, and that we're trying to be as proactive as much as possible versus reactive. And we know that, it's hard not to be reactive when things happen, but the more we stay on the proactive side, hopefully we won't have to get ourselves in this responding to these infractions all the time. So we'll be going over some of these disciplinary procedures, starting from short-term removals to when it becomes a change of placement, looking at patterns of removals, and then when it becomes necessary to do manifestation determination review, and also when it's mandated for us to develop a behavior intervention plan that is developed from a functional behavior assessment. So lots of acronyms there. Again, if there is something that needs clarity, feel free to write in the chat box or email us afterwards, and we can try to get more answers provided for you. Okay, next slide. So we're going to start with what constitutes a short-term removal. And this basically is anytime a student is removed, a student with a disability is removed when they violate a code of conduct. And it's considered a short-term removal when it's not more than 10 consecutive school days. And again, this is provided that the same disciplinary action is provided for a student without a disability. Okay, so how we respond to that student would be the same way as how we would respond to a student without a disability. If it becomes more than 10 days, then that's when it becomes a change of placement, and we'll be talking about that shortly. We also look at the pattern of removals. So basically, this can be a case-by-case basis, whether that pattern of removal constitutes a change of placement. So we're not only looking at the 10 consecutive days, but we're also looking at, are we responding similarly when the student is violating a code of conduct in multiple scenarios. Again, here, a series of removals that total more than 10 school days in a school year becomes a change of placement. So the way we need to do, what we need to look at is the child's behavior substantially similar to the child's behavior in previous incidents? Some factors that we take into consideration is the length of each removal, the total time of removal, and then also the proximity of removals to one another. So let's look at an example to see if we can find or determine whether there's a pattern of removal here. So in this particular case study, it was determined that a bipolar disorder student's removal for 2 days for insubordination, 0.4 days for leaving early for aggressive behavior, 2.8 days for assaulting district staff, all in the month of September. And then that equaled 5.2 days. And then followed by 5 days of removal for assaulting district staff in February. Okay, so here they were saying that although the behavior was substantially similar to the 2.8 day suspension, the total suspension for the substantially similar conduct was only 7.8 days. So again, we're considering the pattern of behaviors here, but we're also taking into consideration the proximity of removals to one another. So in this case, there was not a change of placement. There was not a change of placement here. Okay, so just to reiterate, a disciplinary removal of a child from the current educational placement constitutes a change of placement if, again, the removal is more than 10 consecutive school days, or if we see that there is a pattern of behavior. So if you were to suspend or you suspend a child for 2 days in one instance, and then 3 days for another instance, and then it would eventually add up to 10 school days within a school year, we're looking at there's a pattern of behavior. I'm sorry, a pattern of removal here because it's similar behaviors and if it's pretty much in close proximity to one another. Okay. If there's a change of placement, we also want to make sure that we are notifying parents. So on the date that a decision is made to make a removal that constitutes a change of placement, the LEA must notify the parents of that decision and then also provide the parents with procedural safeguards. Okay. So we're going to kind of give you a little quiz here to just kind of make sure that we understand the pattern of removals. And we're going to give you a scenario. So in this scenario, I want you to think about, is this substantially similar? So first, a student was suspended for theft, and then they got 4 days, and this happened in October. Then they were suspended for theft for 3 days, again in December. And then the student was suspended for a weapon for 8 days and was also in December. So the question here is, are the behaviors all substantially similar? And then is this a pattern of removal that constitutes a disciplinary change in placement? So I'm going to give you some time to think about that for a second.
So first we're going to have you vote on whether or not you believe that the behaviors are all substantially similar.
Okay, so we're going to do a quick poll, and basically All you have to do is look at the question again and then select, so you can actively participate here. You can select one of those options there and we'll see what you guys think. Annette, is the poll open right now?
Yes, it's open.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So the poll is open. A few more seconds to vote. Okay. So this is what everyone voted. We're not going to tell you the answer yet, but you can see here how people voted. So we're pretty split. And now for the second question, I want to ask you, do you believe that this is a pattern of removal that constitutes a change in placement? You can go ahead, and I just opened the poll for that. Do you feel that this is a pattern of removal that constitutes a change in placement? You can either say yes, because it's over 10 days total. This automatically creates a disciplinary change in placement. Or if you believe the answer is yes, because the behavior is all related, it's constituting that pattern of removal and it's over 10 days. Or you can vote no, the behavior is not all related, and so then that does not constitute a pattern of removal that leads to over 10 days. I'll give you a few more seconds to vote. Okay, you can see here how people voted. Got some mixed responses. All right, Jessica, do you want to go ahead and explain the answer?
Okay. Okay, so the answer is it was not substantially similar and there was not a disciplinary change in placement. So the explanation here is that the student was not removed for more than 10 consecutive school days. The student's first 2 suspensions were for alleged theft, and then the final removal was for having a weapon. So although they all totaled more than 10 days within the school year, the student's behavior was not substantially similar in all 3 incidents. So it was a little tricky there, but we wanted to make sure that we kind of thought through looking at the time and then the pattern of behavior and so forth. So the answer there is that the removals did not constitute a disciplinary change of placement. And that's the case there. That is, if you guys want to look that up.
And of course, we're not giving you the full details of the entire case. We just pulled out a few parts of the case to help you practice doing this analysis. But you can definitely read more about this case by using the reference below. All right, let's do another case scenario. So in this activity, this is a 5th grade student, and again, this is a real case that happened that did go to court. This is a 5th grade student, and this 5th grade student had a few different incidences on the bus, and then a few incidences that were not on the bus, that were just in the school. So the student, the month of October was kind of rough for the student on the bus. They had a few different occasions of hitting other students on the bus, and they ended up being suspended on 5 separate days in October. Then they were suspended 1 day in November for yelling on the bus, 2 days in November for yelling and swearing on the bus, and then suspended 1 day in January for yelling and swearing on the bus, another day in April for fighting and swearing on the bus. And then in April and May, there was 3 different times, and in these 3 times were not on the bus. They were in the school setting, but not on the bus, where there was a physical or verbal altercation that led to a few days of suspension 3 different times in April and May. So the questions we want to ask you here are these behaviors all substantially similar? That's the first question, and then we're going to ask you to vote on that, and then we're going to ask you, is this a pattern of removal that constitutes a disciplinary change in placement? And again, remember, we're looking to see if we exceed 10 days. for the total number of suspended days for substantially similar conduct. So first, let's think about with this 5th grade student, are these suspensions, are these behaviors substantially similar? So I'm going to launch that poll question. Go ahead and take a vote. Do you feel like all of these incidences are substantially similar in their behavior? You can say no because some of them happened on the bus and some of them happened in a different school setting. Or maybe you think it's no because some of the incidences were physical and some were verbal. Or you can say yes because they are all physical or verbal altercations that took place in a school setting overall. Or it's okay to vote, I don't know. I'll give you a few more seconds to vote. Okay, I'm going to show you how you voted. I'm not going to tell you the answer yet, but I just want to give you an idea of how everybody is voting. So we're kind of all over the place here. Okay, and now I'm going to ask you to think about, is this a pattern of removal that constitutes a disciplinary change in placement? So go ahead and take a vote here. Is this a pattern of removal that constitutes a change in placement? And for that to happen, you have to, the pattern of removal has to exceed 10 days of suspension for behaviors that are substantially similar. So is that the case here? In this case, we have 10 days of suspension for things that happened on the bus, and we have 9 days for things that did not happen on the bus. So that's one way to look at it, is bus versus not the bus. Or you can look at it a different way. There's some that were verbal, some that were physical. Or you can say these are all substantially similar because they took place in a school setting and the behavior is substantially similar. So you could analyze this in a few different ways. Let's see how everybody voted. Here is how everyone voted. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the answer. Yes, in this case, the behavior was deemed to be substantially similar. And yes, it was a disciplinary change in placement. So the court did rule, this is a case out of Massachusetts, Springfield, Massachusetts. The court did rule in this case that the incidences were substantially similar and that they all took place in a school setting. So they did not differentiate that some were on the bus versus some in the school setting, but rather they viewed them as substantially similar and taking place in a school setting. And Jessica, do you have anything you want to add about this case or the analysis?
No, I mean, I think it's tricky, right? I think this is probably why it came up as a case because, you know, there's the factors of the location, but I think the question is, you know, are all of these behaviors stemming from their disability, and so that I think is the next, which leads us to the next section, is the manifestation determination review. So yeah, so it's not an easy thing. It's not always a black and white thing, and I think that's why we're getting various answers here as well. And again, these cases are meant to have us start to think a little bit more critically about looking at the behaviors, and you know, I think this is why data is so important with our disciplinary actions, right? Is we want to make sure that we're looking for patterns and that what are the supports that are necessary to make sure that we're providing the students with those supports before they get worse. So on to the manifestation determination. And what that is, again, it's, you know, we're examining the relationship between the child's misconduct and their disability. So are their behaviors a manifestation of what their disability is? And so that is also going to take some analysis. And this happens when within 10 school days of the decision to change placement, the IEP team has to come together to review all of the information, all the data in the student's file to determine, number one, if the conduct in question was caused by or had a direct substantial relationship to the child's disability. And then number two, if the conduct in question was the direct result of the LEA's failure to implement the IEP. And again, that just stresses the importance of knowing what's written in the IEP and making sure staff who work with that particular student know what's written on there, so that we're not coming to that case where, yeah, we didn't see that he had these issues and we should have provided the necessary supports here. So again, it's just to remind us to make sure that the IEPs are updated and that we're constantly reviewing and making sure we're implementing those supports with fidelity. Okay. So if the IEP team determines that the conduct was in fact a manifestation of the child's disability, then they have to return the child to their original placement. And again, that asterisk is, of course, except in special circumstances, which we'll go over in a little bit, unless the parent and the IEP team agree that there needs to be a change in placement as part of their behavior intervention plan. Okay, so in addition, they also have to make sure that they conduct a functional behavior assessment, or an FBA, which then leads to a behavior intervention plan. Okay, if there is one already, then the team has to go back and make sure that they review what's written on the behavior intervention plan and then modify it as needed. Okay, so in fact, the behavior intervention plan can be written even before this determination happens. And I think the IDEA requires that, the team implement, again, use of PBIS and other strategies to address behaviors beforehand. But it's up to the IEP team, it's up to LEA's discretion when a BIP is needed. And it's just best practice. We know that the student is going to need some behavior supports. It's always best practice to make sure that there's some sort of intervention plan in place already, rather than having to wait for an MDR to happen. Okay, but IDEA does require that when there is a change of placement, that an FBA and a BIP needs to be put in place. So I think the question is that how do you know if there is a manifestation of the child's disability, right? So that's always another tricky question. So we're going to look at another case here to kind of help us think through. And again, it's a case-by-case scenario. So here's the facts of this particular case. A student was diagnosed with ADHD and ODD. Quote, once his emotions are triggered, he has far more difficulty maintaining appropriate levels of self-control, quick escalation of anger, and reacts defensively. Another fact of the case is that he was eating in class, asked to put it away, threatened to headbutt the teacher. The student was then sent to the office and then home. But while a student in the hallway called parent on the cell phone, that student was upset and shouting on the phone. So the assistant principal sent that student back to the office due to shouting on the phone. And then in turn, that student lunged at the assistant principal and prevented her from leaving, and the police were called. The student got suspended for 10 days. Okay, so again, look at the facts of the case, just quickly review that. And then, do you think that based on just this limited information here, was the child's conduct caused by, or did it have a substantial relationship to his disability? Okay, do we have a polling question for this or no? No, we don't. Okay. So the court's holding was that there was a direct and substantial relationship between the student's disabilities and his subsequent threatening and potentially dangerous behavior towards the AP. So the conclusion was reached because the AP's confrontation of the student while he was in a highly agitated, even hysterical condition, caused that student to lose all ability to self-regulate. Okay, so that's another tricky case here. But if you look at it closely, knowing that the student gets easily agitated and can't self-regulate, he's more apt to act out. And then the court concluded that that was a manifestation of his disability. Okay. Let's look at another case just to get a little bit more practice. In this particular case, it was actually out of DC. Again, the question here is the child's conduct caused by or had substantial relationship to his disability? So in this case, during class, the student engaged in an inappropriate conversation with another student about the sexuality and race of two teachers. The teacher asked the student to leave class, and the student failed to do so, so the teacher grabbed the student's hat and coat, and then the student began calling teacher inappropriate names. Teacher pushed student out of class and shut the door. The student was suspended for 44 days, and the MDR determined that it was not a manifestation of his disability, which was ED, or emotional disturbance. Okay, so then what happened? So from the student's IEP, the student's disability causes quick reactions without thinking when angry, verbal defiance, often yells out, easily angered, and difficulty calming down. So the student's conduct easily falls within the realm of that student's disability as described in the IEP. And so here, the direct and substantial, we're looking at the direct and substantial relationship to his disability. So DCPS took the position that that student knew right from wrong. However, the court held up that the student may very well know right from wrong, but his disability interferes with his ability to exhibit appropriate behavior when he is angry or agitated by words or actions of others. So again, another tricky case, and I often see that that argument of, yeah, he knows right from wrong, he should know better, but we also need to take into consideration what's written on the IEP and what the disability causes. And so we want to make sure that we're taking into consideration that and making sure that we're providing those supports necessary when these behaviors seem to come out. All right. So again, going back to what those special circumstances are, and that is when for more severe cases, so an LEA may remove a student to an interim alternative educational setting, but not for more than 45 school days, which is probably why you saw that previous case was 44 days, without regard to whether the behavior is determined to be a manifestation of the disability. So special circumstances may include carrying a weapon or possessing a weapon at school, knowingly possessing illegal drugs, or selling or soliciting the sale of a controlled substance while at school or on the premises. Or it can also be inflicting serious bodily injury upon another person while at school or on the premises or at a school function. Okay. And serious bodily injury, again, could be tricky, but it's defined here as a substantial risk of death, extreme physical pain, protracted and obvious disfigurement, protracted loss or impairment of the function of a bodily member organ or mental faculty. So that's how it's defined in the law. So we went over a lot of stuff and a lot of different court cases, and so we're providing you some links here for you to dig deeper into some of either the regulations or some of the court cases. Those links are provided for you. And what else do we have?
All right. Well, thank you, Jessica, for presenting that to us today. And we also appreciate everyone who's been putting questions in the question box. So yes, these are links to go be able to study up more on what we just talked about. So these are the federal laws. And then we have here on this slide some OSSI documents. And again, I've uploaded some of these to your menu bar so that you can download directly from your GoToMeeting menu bar today. Or you can use the links from the slides here to find these on the OSSI website. So thank you, Jessica, for addressing that today. And again, feel free to keep typing your questions in the chat box. It is 10 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap up the webinar by spending 60 seconds on other announcements and reminders, and then we will be done. Oh, and here's Jessica's contact information should you also have questions to send directly to her or to the special ed policy team at OSSI or to the training and technical assistance team here at OSSI. That is their contact information. Reminders and announcements. We do have some upcoming training opportunities that I wanted to make you aware of. We have restorative justice is something that we offer a lot of trainings on throughout the year, but in particular, the month of April, we're really focused on how restorative justice can be used for students with disabilities. So we have both a community of practice, a special session with that topic of talking about special ed and restorative justice coming up on April 10th. And then we also have a special full day training opportunity for those of you who are interested in learning how you can apply restorative justice practices and techniques to the world of special education. So that's a full day training where you will receive OSSI professional learning units, and you can register here. We also have upcoming response to intervention training, student support team, and trauma trainings. And these are advertised also on the OSSI events calendar and in the LEA Look Forward. I also want to remind you to save the date for Tuesday, June 12th, when we will have the Start of School Summit. This is an important day for key points of contact, including the LEA Special Education Point of Contact. We will be providing a lot of breakout sessions that focus on your responsibilities as this special ed point of contact in getting ready for the start of school. So this is a very important day that we really hope you can come to. We also realize that sometimes new staff is hired over the summer, so if there's going to be turnover in your position as the SPED POC, we will have a makeup date in August. So stay tuned for more information on this. This also involves the LEA data managers, the English learner points of contact, and a few other key roles from your LEA. And also want to remind you that they're on an update to the local laws for special education, Chapter 30, as you sometimes hear it called in the DC municipal regulations. We've been working for several years now on making updates to Chapter 30, and here is the latest information about where we're at with the status, about what's going to be coming soon to Chapter 30. Here in April, the anticipated changes, focusing on a couple specific areas, and then coming this fall, we are moving towards doing the full revision of Chapter 30. So this is more details about this was actually posted in the LEA Look Forward newsletter, so I encourage you to read the LEA Look Forward newsletter to see the full details of this announcement. This is just a couple highlights that I pulled out. And also there's a new OSSI website. I don't know if you've been to the OSSI website recently, but it is way better in how it's organized and how you can navigate it. And we've tried to really organize things, especially for special education and students with disabilities. We've tried to make it very easy to navigate quickly to what you're looking for on the OSSI website. And there is a new school climate tool available. You know, we just had this webinar about discipline and about supporting students with disabilities. If your school does not already participate in a school climate survey of any type, we strongly encourage you to take advantage of this free resource. OSSE is willing to foot the bill for this if you would like to participate. So we ask that you share this information with your school leaders and see if your school would like to go ahead and do the school climate survey. It only takes 10 to 15 minutes for each person to take the survey. This could be a great activity for you to do towards the end of the school year when you're done with statewide assessments. And what will happen is after you take the survey, you will get a school level report delivered to your school, and then OSSE is partnering with School Talk, who will be able to come and provide a few hours of technical assistance to help your school team look at the results and think about next steps. So this is a great opportunity for something that is at no cost to your schools that can give some great data to then continue to work towards building a better school climate. If you have questions about this, you can email Jessica. And of course, everything that comes out a lot of things that come out each week in the Look Forward are important for you as the special ed point of contact to stay aware of. So we encourage you to subscribe to the newsletter, and also particularly to look at what's coming up for professional development opportunities that you may want to send your staff to participate in. And there is also a full catalog showing all of the things coming up in the next few months from the Division of Teaching and Learning that's posted on our website here. Again, thank you for joining us today on your busy Friday. This recording will be posted within the next few business days, and I will also send a follow-up email. And we look forward to seeing you join us next month for our webinar next month, where we will continue to provide you with key updates, announcements, and training for your role as a special ed POC. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.